any good operator is going to offer you education. So if you find someone that you are comfortable with and you really connect with and you decide you want to invest with them, they should be educating you along the way so that you're not coming into it blind.
Do you love your job but want other investment options than your company's 401k and trying to pick stocks? If so, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, you will get actionable information for your passive real estate investment journey. Welcome back to another episode of Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we have Angel Williams on the podcast. Super interesting episode where we talk a lot about her early career as a teacher in the normal sense before she pivoted her career into teaching and coaching people on real estate investing and how to invest passively and actively and generate income through real estate through her company called The Academy Presents. We also walk through her early experience with real estate from her parents and grandparents and how they invested in and acquired single family houses. And then we talk about her first deal, which had a lot of bumps in the road, which was a 75 unit deal. So a lot of content about coaching and why it's important to educate yourself on real estate and how to invest both actively and passively. So let's get Angel on the pod. All right, Angel, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you on.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. So maybe give the listeners a little bit of an intro on you and your background, and then we'll unpack some stuff.
Absolutely. So I actually have a business degree and then a master's of science in economics. 2003, there were like no jobs out there. And I found a private school that I became the 4th and 5th grade teacher. I also became their music teacher for like pre-K 3 through 8th grade. And then I taught the upper level math. That was like my first taste of teaching. The next year I went into the public school. So I stayed in the K through 12 public school environment for about 17 years. I still teach college and I've been doing that for about 18, 19 years now. But I had a horrible experience here in Wichita Falls and I left the public school scene. And I was destroyed. I mean, being a teacher was who I was. And I talked about it. I'm like, what can I do? All I know how to do is talk. And he said, no, you know how to teach and you know how to get information. And so we started the Academy Presents. I never know which way to lean. Real Estate Investing Rocks. And it is our educational platform. And that is where we do our podcasts and our summits. And we do all of the things that we can help people learn with. We've got a VIP subscription to our extensive, like 400-hour content library. And we've just got all these things going on the education side. And then we went active side. My husband started coaching, underwriting, and it just exploded. And my friend had a post just the other day that was like, what did you say yes to? It was outside of your comfort zone. I was like, oh my gosh. We said yes to doing the summits, and that led to the podcast, and that led to our virtual meetup every Monday, and that led to this and this and this. And those were the things that freed us from our W-2.
Yeah.
And it's awesome now looking back, like, what if we hadn't said yes to that first summit in March of 2020? What if?
Yeah. So you were teaching for the first chunk of your career, right? And obviously a natural progression is real estate, right? From teaching. How did you kind of figure out real estate and just real estate teaching, right? Because typically teachers, they don't make a ton of money, so they are not exposed to other investment opportunities outside of like 401k and 403b or whatever teachers can invest in, which is similar to 401k. So how did you stumble upon real estate?
So it's kind of cool. My husband and I actually both grew up in families that invested in residential real estate. We bought our first house in 2003 while Jason was finishing up his doctorate, and he finished in 2006. We moved, and that became our first rental. And we have talked about this so many times, but we never discussed whether we were going to sell the house. We just started talking about the make ready and finding a property manager and how that was going to be our rental. And looking back on it, I was like, why did we not talk about selling it? But it had been so ingrained in us that you invest in real estate. That was just what we did. Yeah. And so we've been in residential real estate investing for 20 years because we started so young. We were in our 20s. And that was our first house. We've got, I think, 6 singles now, a quad, a couple of duplexes. And we're not totally out of residential. Like if something comes across our plate and it is too good to pass up, we're going to buy it.
Yeah.
Because we know residential. So, and
that's interesting. So your upbringing was really to say yes to investing in real estate. Like what were some of the things that you're exposed to in your childhood that maybe the average person didn't get exposure to when it comes to real estate?
So my grandfather was a fireman. he was in the Army, and then he became a fireman after that. So I don't know if they actually call him fireman because it's still a piece of the Army. And then my grandmother was a civilian librarian, Fort Hood, which is a big Army base.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather, I don't know how much you know about how fireman scheduling works, but like they do the 24-hour shifts.
Yep.
And they're off for several days in a row. And so he had that chunk of time. And my grandfather actually started buying real estate in the late 70s, early 80s. Wow. And you know anything about history, 81 is when the federal funds rate hit 20%. So they are investing when interest rates are like something we've never seen. Now we're all crying about these interest rates right now.
Yeah.
Try 15 to 25% interest rates.
Right.
And when I think about it too, my grandfather, he worked really hard for those C's in school. My grandmother was Hispanic. She only made it through 8th grade. She ended up getting a GED. And that was how she became a civil servant.
Yeah.
Fort Hood. But they weren't super educated. My grandmother had a ton of common sense. But my grandfather was more like, he was the tortoise from the tortoise and the hare. He just didn't give up. He kept going. And they were successful with it. And so I saw that. There were other things I learned from them too. Like I will never self-manage. My grandparents in their 50s, 60s, they would still go door to door at the first of the month and collect rents.
Oof.
After my grandmother passed away, my grandfather would still shuffle door to door and go pick up rents. I'm like, what the heck are you doing, Grandpa?
Yeah. He's got to have those places paid off. He can afford a property manager.
Like, you need a property manager.
Yeah.
And we finally got him into a property manager, but seeing that growing up, like I learned a ton. Like my grandfather was amazing with drywall. So he could do a lot of the repairs. And if fridge went out or something went out, they'd go over to the little shed, go find a replacement, carry it over there. And then they'd go find the appliance repair guy and fix that one. And that one go back into the shed. But once I got to a stage in my life where I was having my own real estate, I knew I didn't want any of that.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that really influenced me in my journey.
That's a lot of people when they hear investing in real estate, whether they think it's passive or active, they don't want to deal with toilets, tenants, or trash. Yeah. So it's like when we bought our first duplex, I underwrote it so that I could have a property manager. One, it was not local. It was on the other side of Pennsylvania where I was living at the time. But still, even if it was right down the street, I don't want to be collecting rent. I don't want to be dealing with the issues, right? You want to be as seamless and as passive as you possibly can. And so is that kind of how you thought about real estate when you were like, okay, you bought this primary residence, you had no thought of selling it, which is what most people think. They buy a house, that's their biggest investment, right? That's their retirement, if you will. And that's where they're really going to get some chunks of money, whether it's through a HELOC or they sell it, right? So you automatically were like, hey, let's buy this primary, let's live in it for a handful of years, and then we'll keep it and just buy another house. Is that kind of how the whole mindset thought went? Yeah,
it's really kind of crazy. That's what we did. And then we got here and we wound up getting a couple more. And then we wound up with a couple more. It's really cool. But what happened was about 2017, 2018, we came to this realization. We have a special needs son, and special needs family members are incredibly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have one of two decisions. You can go ahead and just commit to being in a cycle of poverty so that your child always qualifies for state services, or you can crunch the numbers and realize that you can do so much more. And we crunched the numbers and we were like, this is insane. We are inflicting ourselves with suffering when we've got other options.
Yeah.
And so we chose to build wealth and create our own insurance system. And we were able to get insurance for our PPO. It's not cheap, but it is freaking platinum. Like our yearly deductible is like $250.
Wow.
And like one of our son's therapies is $125,000 a year, maybe 125 a year.
Yeah.
And so we had to have good insurance. I was locked into that W-2. My husband was locked into his W-2 because we had to provide insurance.
Right.
And so we had chosen to break free from that cycle of poverty. But then once we realized we could also get our own insurance, we were able to break free from the cycle of W-2 and working towards somebody else's dream.
Yeah, because when you're working for another company, you're helping the owner of that business, whether it's a school or a corporation, build that company, and you're getting paid for it and you get benefits and all that other fun stuff. Mm-hmm. But there is another way. So I want to kind of dig into your transition from W-2 and all that. But before we do that, I want to take a quick sponsor break. So we will be right back.
Whether you're trying to hire a full-time employee or a contractor to fill a gap, Hire Tomorrow can help. Hire Tomorrow is a boutique recruitment firm that has successfully filled sales and marketing, human resources, and technology positions with companies ranging from startups to Fortune 500. If you're struggling to find the right talent, check out hiretomorrow.com or reach out to recruiting@hiretomorrow.com to see how they can help.
All right, we are back on the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast with Angel Williams. And we started out, she got her start in real estate early on, was exposed to real estate from her parents and grandparents. And now we're kind of at the process or the stage where you're going to transition away from the W-2 cycle, right? Which is you feel beholden to this company because you need the income, you need the benefits. Obviously, you having a special needs child, that's really important, right? And so how did you kind of make that jump from W-2 and having that quote unquote security of a job to launching your business? And did you start with the Academy Presents kind of right away, or how did that all kind of come out?
So it was late December of 2019. I was having a really rough time at the school, had nothing to do with the kids, had everything to do with the administration, the principal in particular. And we just butted heads. We didn't get along well. She didn't like my style. And it was just rough. And so one night, I'm trying to turn off these voices in my head. They won't stop. They won't stop. They keep going. And so I got a drink and then another drink and another drink. And the next morning, I was unresponsive. And my husband calls 911 and I'm in the ER. And as I'm coming back around, the first thing I said to him was, please don't make me go back.
Wow.
I mean, I almost died. And the first thing that comes to my mind as I'm coming back around is, please don't make me go back.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, yeah, no, you're not going back. And so I wound up going out on FMLA. And during that time, I'm like, what are we going to do? Because my doctors were like, there's no way you're going back. This isn't going to be good for you. At that point, we had enough passive income from our residential stuff that I didn't really have to teach. I was one, teaching for the insurance, but two, I just love to teach. And like, I look back on my Kirby kids and those are my babies. I see them around town working. They'll come and give me hugs and I miss them. And I really enjoyed that relationship that I got to have with them because it was a high poverty school. There was, 45% Hispanic, 40% Black, 15% mixed white and Asian. And we connected. And that was really the place where I learned you just have to be you.
Right.
And those kids in 30 seconds, they knew if you were real or not. That really honed in me the necessity of just being real and being you. And so when we started in January 2020, it was like, what the heck are we going to do? And so I had this thing and Jason and I sat and we were like, okay, what about if we do like a one-day webinar or something? Now, we were already in the same circle as Dan Hanford.
Okay.
We were like, Dan tell me what to do. Like, give me some ideas. So I'm actually sitting in my doctor's office. I'm in the waiting room, about to get my FMLA paperwork filled out. And Dan calls me. I was like, must be a butt dial. We're supposed to talk this afternoon. Then he called me right back and I'm like, what the heck? So I pick up. I'm like, hey, we're supposed to talk this afternoon. He's like, yeah, but I had time right now. And so then I'm like ripping through my backpack, looking for something to take notes on because I'm about to get notes from like the absolute king of virtual summits. Because at that point in time, he was like the only person doing virtual summits.
Yeah.
And so he's giving me these tips and these ideas. I said, okay, what's the difference between a 1 day, a 2 day, and a 3 day event? He's like, it's just coordinating people. Thank God I was naive enough to believe that, because let me tell you, it is not just coordinating people. And if I had known how difficult it was, I would have never done the first one.
Wow.
And we're about to have our 8th one. So it was truly amazing. And it's been a lot of fun. And that was what really got us started in collecting the information and sharing the information and getting to meet people. And just for me, it's getting to talk to people and hear their stories and share their stories. And know that every time somebody listens to what we're doing, we are giving somebody the chance to change their trajectory and to change their destiny. And it fills my teacher heart each and every time I get to do it because it's amazing.
Yeah, being a teacher doesn't mean you're in a school, right? It can be summits, it can be anything. And I didn't grow up in an environment like you did with real estate investing experience or anything like that. And so that's part of the reason why I launched the podcast, is to give people that are in my sphere of influence and my network that maybe don't have any exposure to real estate. And my mom was a teacher. She was actually a special needs teacher. So I have some affinity for what you're going through. But it's one of the things where it feels good to be able to share information with anybody that cares to listen to the podcast. And you're doing it a little bit more forcefully or in your face, in the sense that you're putting on these events. So you're bringing people in. And so I'm curious kind of how that first one went, right? In the sense of who attended, like how many people, like how hard was it to get people to join up and do all this? Because I'm assuming at this point you've done your own deals, but you haven't done bigger deals, or I don't know how active or vocal you were. So how did you kind of get it out there?
So we hired Chad Whitfeld. He was Adam Adams's media guy at the time. So this would have been, again, January 2020.
Yeah.
And March is Women's History Month. And so I was like, you know what? We're going to have all female speakers. We are not going to market it that way because I don't want everyone out there to say, oh, it's a women's event. So we never marketed it that way.
Got it.
We did pay-per-click ads. We did everything. And we had 375 attendee signups for that very first one.
Wow.
We had 24 speakers and 2 or 3 different panels. So it was a 3-day live event and it was insane. So much fun. And again, like I said, if I had known how hard it was, I would have never, ever done it. But it is amazing how fast your comfort zone catches up.
Yeah.
And there's this other piece too, where when I was teaching, I would watch my teacher friends and my heart would break because they felt like they had no other options. And so a big part of what I'm doing too is to figure out a way to help my teacher friends learn and help first responders, EMTs, policemen to understand that you can create wiggle room. I'm not saying you got to leave your W-2.
Yeah.
Because teaching is a calling. Law enforcement is a calling. And if that is something you want to be in, by all means, keep it. But let's build some wiggle room in there.
Yeah.
Because once you're no longer relying on the paycheck, you become a completely different teacher. And I have to assume you also become a completely different EMT or a completely different law enforcement person. Like, it's totally free.
Yeah.
You're doing it because you love it, not because you have to.
Well, even if you're a W-2 at a Fortune 500 company, but you have $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month coming in passively, and it's fairly reliably coming in, you're going to take more risks or feel a little bit more emboldened to ask for a raise or speak up in a meeting and voice some concerns, whatever the case may be. I know I started feeling that way when I started, and I didn't have that amount of money coming in, but just knowing like, oh, wow, I've got like an asset that's like doing work for me, and to use kind of what's on your shirt, like it was making me money while I'm sleeping, right? So I don't have to work for it. I've invested capital to acquire an asset. And so I feel the same way. If I can help people build what I call a little bit of financial foundation and having a little bit of a passive income coming in to make your life a little bit easier, whether it's paying some bills or going on a better vacation or whatever the case may be, it just gives you a lot of flexibility and frees you up to be more passionate or more into your job or do something different, right? So let's talk about some of the other deals that you've gotten into, because it sounds like you've done some residential stuff. Have you gone any further up the chain, if you will, and done any bigger multifamily 100+ unit deals or anything like that? And then any other interesting investments that you've done?
Absolutely. So we started out in probably about 2018. We decided to do some passive investing. So that between 18 and 19, we invested in 4 deals passive.
Okay.
And then those just kind of rode out. Starting in, I think it was 2020, my husband was like, I'm ready to leave my W-2.
Wow.
At the end of 2020, because I resigned formally in February 2020. I knew that.
That's a lot of risk with COVID. I mean, I quit my W-2 and started my recruiting business and my real estate business in January of 2020, having no idea that COVID was going to ramp up. I was nervous doing all of that stuff. So that's interesting. You guys both went fully in 2020.
Now, that was when he started getting excited about it and thinking about it.
Okay.
You got to remember, like on his side of the family, so his dad was a professor at Baylor, but he had about 60, 70 units of residential multifamily fully paid off right there in Waco. So that's the experience Jason came from.
Wow. Okay.
He's like, I really feel good about this multifamily. I feel good about the way we're doing the passive income. He's like, so he started to think about, how am I going to get out of my job?
Yeah.
And he was actually laid off in June of 22. And he was given 6 months of severance.
Wow.
So we had 6 months to make sure we can make it work, right?
Yeah.
Jason came to the realization that it's been over a year now that he's been without a W-2. And so we started thinking back, like, the cash flow thing sucks. But when you get a big chunk of change on a capital event, you better figure out how to budget that out. But we figure it out. And it's cool to have the freedom that we have. But it was in 2021 that we had an LOI accepted. And that deal was crazy. First deal is always going to be crazy. It just is.
Yeah.
So the first GP team imploded, I think before the LOI even made best and final, or maybe it had made best and final. I forget now. So we created a second GP team. That team imploded after we were trying to get a loan product. We'd been through 12 or 15 loan products. Nothing was working out. And this is when you discover what people's risk tolerances are.
Yeah.
Jason and I had $100,000 that had gone hard day one. Better than that, we had borrowed that money from his mom. So we really
You're in it.
Oh, yeah, we were in.
Yeah.
Risk tolerances were showing, and people were like, this isn't how it's supposed to go. And I was like, no, I'm talking, our coach is Joe Fairless. I'm like, I'm talking to Joe. Joe says this is exactly how it goes. But there were some other experienced people on the team that were like, no, it's not supposed to be this rough. And they listened to the other people instead of us when we're dealing with a coach who had like, at that point in time, it was like just a little over $1 billion in assets under management. And we were talking to Joe like every other day because we were stressed and freaking out.
Yeah.
And second team implodes. So now we are an extension in, almost to the second extension, and we don't even have a team. And my husband comes home one day and I'm still in bed. And he's like, you know what? I'm just so glad that you're asleep and not drunk. And so he's like, I couldn't be at work any longer. I'm sick to my stomach. We've got to figure this out. So we made a list of 35 people that we thought could help us out. They had the experience, the financials. We just thought they could help us out.
And how big was the deal that you were working on?
$5 million.
How many units?
It's 72.
Okay.
Not even super huge. And so I was like,
but still, first deal, there's a lot riding on that for sure. So got it.
Yeah. So we made a list of about 35 names. I'm like, you know what? This is going to be first 5 names. No, it was not the first 5 names. We got a lot of keep smiling and dialing, which is like sucker punch, knife to the gut, twist, twist. Wasn't the first 5, wasn't the first 10, wasn't even the first 15. It was call 16. And it was Agostino Pintus. I never know how to say his last name, but he dropped everything and he helped us that day. And we got a loan product that day. And he worked with the loan broker we were using at the time. We were using Old Capital. And Agostino reached out to Julie to find out what's going on, get some of the skinny. And he's like, okay, we're going to go with Lima One. It's that 11th hour loan lender. I promised myself I'd never use them again. And I used them again. I promised myself I'd never use them again. The second time, I'll probably wind up using them again. They should come through for you.
Yeah.
And they wound up coming through. We built a third team. And with the third team, we got across the finish line December 17th of 21.
Okay.
So we went under contract in August and we didn't close until December 17th of 21. And we'd never done a deal. I'm talking to the seller and I'm like, I know we have no history. I know that I don't know how to prove it, but I'm telling you, we're going to get this deal done. We are going to close this deal. Please, please, please work with us. I swear we're going to get it closed. And we did. And man, we earned massive street cred because at the end of the day, we wound up being the lead sponsors in our own first deal with our friend Frank.
Yeah.
And it was insane. And well, Frank was a teacher too. So Frank also did the 17 years, but something about him makes me really competitive. And we wound up raising $1 million for our first deal.
Nice.
And then we just kind of sat here and waited. And then another deal came in and we wound up closing it December 22nd of 22. We didn't have a single extension and we raised another $1 million for that one.
Yeah, it's the law of the first deal, right? The first one, you kind of have to cut your teeth and literally just grin and bear it to kind of get it across the finish line. And then typically you build credibility across the board, right? Because you're building credibility with your team. I'm sure some of the other GPs that fell out probably are licking their wounds or maybe wishing they kind of stayed on.
3 of them came back and invested in the deal.
There you go. So, and then I'm sure you build credibility with the lender, right? So whoever you're dealing with, the broker, the seller's agent. So there's a lot of credibility built by getting a deal across the finish line because it's not easy and it's not done by one person. There's always a team of people. You mentioned general partner team. You have to have people with the income, the net worth, the experience in order to qualify for one of these commercial loans. So congratulations on that. That's awesome, especially in 2021, because obviously everything was inflated and very, very competitive market in 2021 and still somewhat near the end of 2022. But how are those deals doing now?
No, they're doing all right. We had a situation on one of them where there was a gas leak. And of course, they found it the Thursday before Easter weekend. And in a small, kind of a suburb of our town, city offices were closed on Friday. So there was no getting emergency permits.
Yeah.
So that particular property of 72 units didn't have any gas for all of Easter weekend.
Wow.
And then it was like, at least one of the bills to fix the gas lines was $40,000. And that just kind of killed everything.
Yeah.
And so we had another kind of crazy expense come up too. And so we paused distributions on that. We are not cap calling, but we paused because we want to go back and build some reserves back up.
Yeah. And
then we'll go forward again. So we feel good about our underwriting because it was stress tested really well. My husband actually coded our whole underwriting spreadsheet.
Oh, cool.
So we feel really strongly about his underwriting skills. And yes, we're paused, but how many people are paused right now? How many people are cap calling?
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this in mid-ish July of 23, and nobody knew that obviously interest rates were going to do what they're doing and all that. But yeah, I mean, deals that I'm in have paused. I know people that have had capital calls, which essentially you've got to raise more money from your team, whether it's a general partner team or the limited partners that are investing, to keep the deal afloat, because you hope that you can get to a point where either A, you can sell it, or you can get to a stability level where you can refinance it. I think there's going to be some stress coming out in the next 12-ish months, because a lot of the deals that were purchased in the last 2 years were done, and most of the value add deals are purchased on bridge debt, right? So it's variable rate, shorter terms, and the goal is to refinance in 2 to 3 years. And if you can't do that, well, then you either got to go back to your bridge lender and renegotiate terms, or you've got to figure out trying to sell it. And we're definitely not in a market right now where you're going to get the actual price that you probably need. So yeah, it's an interesting time for sure.
No, it's a really crazy time. And we've been lucky with that one. We have a second one that we got in December of 22. And the first one's really Class B. I don't care what anybody says. Dan Hanford, when I talked to him about it, he was like, I don't know, Angel. That's a Class C. It's a 19A. I'm like, Dan, I'm telling you, it's a B. He's like, have you seen my red flags? Let's go through my red flags. I'm like, like there was no change in his mind, right?
Yeah.
So I just didn't worry about it. But it's still neat to have people in your circle like that can really, you rise to a different level.
Yeah.
It's like playing tennis against somebody that's better than you. They're always going to make sure they lob it back to you, but they're going to make you chase for it. And you get more practice because you get more hits in, you get more reps in. And so it's really awesome to come up against somebody that is going to push me. What are my red flags? What do you think those red flags are? Why do you think those are red flags? And just asking me those questions and pushing my knowledge. And I'm the relationships person. Like I talk to people, I form relationships. I don't necessarily do the numbers. I don't always know why people have red flags. That's not my lane. My lane is talking to people, getting to know people, sharing.
That's your husband's lane, right? You push him off to him.
And so it's like you get to flex muscles you don't know you have, and you're building those muscles you don't know you have. So I'm so grateful those conversations happen, but they're hard. And then with the next one we've got, it's skinnier in the front because it's a C. It's a true C. So it's skinnier in the front, and we're starting to get questions about like, I haven't gotten any distributions. Distribution is going to be coming. And we're like, it's skinny in the front. And with the economic environment right now, it's even skinnier. We're not
skinnier, meaning there's not a lot of cash coming in. There's not a lot of cash flow, and you've got to invest money in a Class C value add to renovate, bring the rent units up to a better class of tenant, increase rents and all that fun stuff. So Class C value adds, typically the first year, there's very little, if any, cash flow to distribute. You hope that it impacts and picks up in year 2 is typically how I've seen those deals look.
No, absolutely. And honestly, from what we understand, if you do distribute and it's not from what's actually coming in profit margin wise, that's kind of a Ponzi scheme.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that over-raise or raise reserves, if you will, and then they just redistribute that money back, which does feel a little bit Ponzi-ish. So yeah,
that's not something that we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so distributions haven't started up for the second one yet. They will. I feel confident that they will. Our market's pretty steady. There's things here that people really hate, like our population hasn't changed since 1960, but it has.
And where are you located? Sorry, I don't even know if I asked that.
Yeah, we're in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Okay.
If you know where the Dallas-Fort Worth area is, we're about 2 hours to the left and up a little bit.
Got it. Okay.
We have an Air Force base here. We're the largest NATO Air Force base in the U.S. So we actually have a lot of foreign families that come in.
Yeah.
And when NATO families come in, they bring their whole family because they're here for several years. And so they contribute to the economy here, but they aren't counted in the population.
Oh, interesting.
They're considered, I guess, transient because they're not permanent here. So there's still a lot of movement in the population here. There's still a lot going on, but it's just super steady. At one point in time, we were the lowest cost of living in the United States. I believe we're still the lowest cost of living in Texas.
That's interesting because there's a lot of West Texas towns that are transient in the sense that they are either boom or bust with oil and all that stuff. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. Learn something new. It's one of the benefits of doing this podcast is I learn something new pretty much every episode. So
awesome.
Well, you're teaching me, right? You're a teacher. So that's kind of par for the course. So I want to kind of learn a little bit more about, obviously, your husband's doing more of the underwriting, it sounds like, but your last deal was 7 months ago, if you will. Are you guys still actively looking for deals, or are you kind of paused, making sure that you operate the ones that you have? Or are you kind of just continuing to focus on the kind of events and the coaching and learning from your Academy Presents?
So the Academy Presents kind of always runs. We do have some other properties that we're looking at. We are backyard investors. And when I say that, I mean, like our first property is 15 minutes from our house. Our second property is 4 miles from our house. We've got a few more that we're looking at that are within a 5-mile range of our house. You think you're going to hate it because you think you get all these phone calls. You're always going to be dealing with it, but you're really not. So long as you've got a third-party management company, they take care of everything.
Yeah.
The benefit is when what hits the fan, you jump in the car and you can show up.
Right.
That's the biggest benefit. We had an issue with insurance. We had 24 hours before they were going to cancel our insurance if we didn't fix the rail-to-rail distance on the stairwells. And so I drove over there. And I'm kind of like Indiana Jones's little sidekick. He wasn't actually round, but I am short and round. So I'm in my Chacos and I hightail it in my car over there. And we're looking around. We're like, how are we going to fix this? And one of the maintenance guys walks by with rebar. And I'm like, oh, Mike, come here. And I look at the rebar. I'm like, this is what we're going to do. And somebody on the GP team was like, is that going to elevate the property? I'm like, we are past elevating the property. We got to keep our insurance.
Yeah.
And so they brought another guy, a floater from another property, and he was cutting rebar and welding it in place right there. I'm taking pictures and I'm sending them to our insurance guy. And I'm like, we are taking care of this. Here's the receipt. We have bought all the rebar we need. There are 16 stairwells. There is no way on God's green earth we're going to get this done today, but this one is complete.
Right.
Please let that be enough. And so they did not cancel our insurance and we were able to keep it because I was able to drive there and get it taken care of. But there were things like we're standing around waiting. I went to my car, opened the door, stood and took a drink of my soda, put it back down and walked back to where everybody else was. My feet were killing me. I'm on concrete. Again, I'm short and round. So my feet are dying, but I'm like, if I sit down, it's going to signal to everybody else that it's break time.
Right.
And so I just stood there for, it was 8 or 9 hours. It was well after 5 p.m. when we finally got that first one done. And my feet were on fire.
Yeah.
But I knew that that was what I needed to do.
Well, better that than losing insurance, right? Like there's painful things and your feet were painful, but it would have been even more painful to lose that insurance because you would have had a hard time probably getting new insurance and probably had to do a lot more work to get other insurance. So that's an interesting and really actually good story. It sounds like you've had coaches along the way, Dan Hanford, big name in the industry, Joe Fearless, and some other folks you mentioned. If somebody's listening to this and let's assume they're a W-2 hardworking professional, but they kind of want other options. Maybe they don't want to quit their job. Maybe they love it, but they make good money and they just want to build some of that foundation or security or wiggle room. What are some things you think would be good first steps other than obviously they're listening to this podcast, so they're getting at least some knowledge, but what do you think are some good first steps that people would want to get a little bit more active in their investing in real estate?
So any good operator is going to offer you education.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find someone that you are comfortable with and you really connect with and you decide you want to invest with them, they should be educating you along the way so that you're not coming into it blind.
Yeah.
They should be answering your questions and don't feel dumb asking those questions. As another tip, when we first got started, I thought that if we did a bunch of recon on different operators, that we would look inexperienced. So we just kind of went off my gut. We got really lucky. 3 of them were amazing. 1 of them was crap. We didn't lose money in nominal terms. In real terms, we did.
Yeah.
But not in nominal terms. It was like a 1.1x. But I didn't want to do a lot of recon because I thought it would make us look inexperienced. So if you've never done a deal, holy crap, recon.
Yeah.
And when you think you've done enough, do some more.
Yeah.
Because what I have discovered is the more experienced people get, the more seasoned these investors are, the more recon I watch them do. Because I kind of like to recon. I get phone calls from people who are like, hey, what do you know about so-and-so? And I might have to call another person. It might take 2 or 3 of us to really put a good story together or to be able to put together something meaningful for someone. But we will do that for people because, again, it's the teacher in me. I want to save people. I want to make sure they don't do things that are going to hurt them. But if you're information seeking, I'm going to do everything I can to help you find that information. So don't.
Yeah, you're asking people to invest.
Yeah, they're hard. Like they're long-term earnings.
Yeah, sometimes very significant, especially if you're dealing with teachers and first responders and all that. They're not hedge fund managers that are making millions, right? So investing 50, 100 grand is a lot. I think Dan actually says you got to build know, like, and trust the person that you're working with. So you can't do that in one phone call. You've got to watch what they're doing on social media. You've got to talk to them. You've got to follow up with maybe some referrals and all of that. So especially if you want to be a passive investor, vetting the operator or the person that is bringing you a deal is important, right? You can know all the jargon and the lingo when it comes to underwriting a real estate investment, but you got to know that that person that's bringing you that deal is experienced, or if they aren't, maybe it's their first deal, right? Maybe it's like, hey, I'm bringing this opportunity because I'm investing my own money in this deal, and here's why I'm investing in it and all of that. So yeah, that's super important to really just get a baseline knowledge of the commercial real estate landscape, but then also dig into the operator and who's actually bringing you the deal.
And don't just believe social media. That was something we did. And we actually met teams on social media and in person. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to dig further. And I've talked to a few people here and there. And see, my thing is, I got blue and purple hair. I wear t-shirts and I wear jeggings because I kind of outgrew my jeans through COVID. So sometimes people don't take me seriously. And I told some people about some of our experiences in various investments, and they didn't listen. And now they're coming back and they're like, man, what could I have done differently? Because as a teacher, I want to know, how should I have taught you differently? What should I have done differently to help you understand better? And the most recent person that reached out to me was like, no, this is on me. I heard what you said, and then I went with my own intuition, and it was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of real estate investing. It can be emotional, but you got to try to take as much emotion out of it, because you got to trust the numbers. Because I fall in love with deals. I'm like, this should make sense. Everything's an Excel spreadsheet, right? So you can tweak the numbers here and there to make a deal look really good, but that's not going to be good for you or your investors in the long run, as far as that goes. So, well, Angel, this has been super fun. I want to kind of transition to the end here. But before I do, you mentioned you've got a summit coming up, or maybe talk through that real quick, and then we'll round this thing out.
Absolutely. So we have our 8th summit coming up. That is just insane to me. That means we're finishing out 4 years of doing virtual summits. And when we first started, it was literally like Dean Hanford and me.
Yeah.
We were the only people really doing those virtual summits. And so it's wild now to see how many people are doing them and how amazing it is. And it's just a super amazing landscape. One of the best things that happened during the pandemic was the way that the virtual landscape just exploded.
Yeah, Dan was doing those before it was COVID, and then he was the only one doing them. So he was taken off, and then everybody else started doing them. So yeah, that's super interesting. Congrats.
Yeah, so when it started off, he was doing January and June. So I started doing March and September.
There you go.
And he started going to live events, I guess 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And he went to live events. I guess they're in June. So they're in the summer. And so that's what he's doing now. And he's a friend of ours. And then Joe's changed up his a little bit too. BEC's like moving into April next year, I believe. We're still March and September. And I don't necessarily think that we'll move face to face with a special needs son. And then we also have 3 typical daughters. We've got a big family, and it makes it a little hard sometimes. But
well, you could reach a lot of people and actually provide a decent price point, because you don't have the price of a venue and all that other fun stuff. So typically the virtual events, maybe there's less engagement because there's not that running into people in common areas or whatever. But if you're there for education and really trying to hone your craft, virtual events are a great tool for sure.
Well, we actually run ours as a meeting setup now. So it's not like a seminar where you can't talk to people that are there. We set it up. You can chat with people that are there. You can't necessarily talk to them because, of course, we've got speakers and stuff. But the whole screen, all the squares are on the screen. It's like,
oh, that's awesome.
Everybody is there with everybody else. So it's a really neat setup. And our next one is September 20th, 21st, and 22nd. We're moving to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And it's going to be amazing. Like, we have our free tier. There's probably about 30 to 35 hours of free content there. All of the speakers who are presenting, we pre-record it, and it's all there for you to peruse at your leisure. If you have a VIP subscription, you get live access for free. It's included in your subscription. Okay. And that's where the master classes happen, and the round tables and the panels, and just everything that you would get in a live event. We do Q&A, and there's about 30 people that come into those live events, sometimes 40, and it seriously feels like a mastermind.
Yeah.
It's amazing. If anybody saw Don Spafford's post, it would have been 3 Mondays ago. He talks about when he came to his first one in March of 21 and completely changed his trajectory.
No, that's awesome. I actually had Don on my podcast a little while ago. So yeah.
When he posted that, I was like just stunned. Like, I'm crying, and I'm like, you never know the kind of impact you have on someone.
Yeah. And
so it was one of those teacher moments where you're just like, oh my Lord.
No, that's awesome. Are the speakers only talking about multifamily, or is it kind of across the landscape of investing and kind of the
there
whole
are
thing?
A lot of stuff. I'm going to have some people this time that talk about, it's not even hard money, it's private money.
Yeah.
Private lenders. I've got some people that are going to talk about industrial, maybe some industrial flex. And of course, there's multifamily. My husband and I can talk about oil and gas. We can talk about residential. We're getting into vineyards, so we can talk about maybe what that looks like. We're not real versed in that. But again, I'm good friends with Keely and Mason. And if somebody says, Angel, we want to hear about vineyards, I will get Keely and Mason on there and we will talk vineyards.
Yeah, I had Keely on my podcast before, and she's in the same coaching group that I'm in, and super interesting stuff she's doing with investing in vineyards and all that fun stuff here in Texas. I'm in Austin, so you're up in Wichita Falls. So, and I didn't realize, obviously, until I moved here that we have our own, wine country out here in Fredericksburg. So it's pretty interesting that we have that in Texas.
Yeah, well, and to be able to call yourself a Texas wine, it used to be 50% of the grapes have to come from Texas. Now it's 75.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good for Keely because the more she'll need to grow more grapes because they need 25% more instantly. So,
well, we actually have a friend here that has a winery, and I connected Mason with him.
Okay.
That way they could get their Texas grapes for the
wine. Right. Very interesting. Angel, this has been amazing. I want to round us out with the way I round out every podcast with a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So what is one piece of advice that got you started or helped you along your real estate investing journey?
It's just coordinating people.
The Dan Hanford quote.
If we hadn't said yes to that, we wouldn't have said yes to the seminars and the podcasts and the virtual meetups, and we wouldn't have said yes to so many things.
Yeah.
It was that. It's just coordinating people. If I hadn't heard that, so much of this would have never happened.
Well, good thing you heard it and didn't dig in too much more because maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I'm glad for my sake and for everybody, all the listeners that you said yes. All right, next question. What is your favorite real estate or business book that you're into right now?
I don't know that it's a real estate or business book. So have you ever heard of the book Positive Intelligence?
I have not.
Okay. So Positive Intelligence, Shirzad, Chamine, Chamine. And there's a TED Talk on it too. But basically what it does is in the book, he breaks down these saboteurs that you have, these voices in your head that they give you imposter syndrome. They make you think you're stupid. They kick you while you're down, and it helps you identify them for yourself. So like everybody has the judge.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are or how amazing you think you are and how non-judgmental you are. You have a judge. So we all have a judge in our head. And then there's these other 9. And there's this free test that you can take as an assessment. And it tells you really what your saboteurs are. And so my top saboteurs were restless and like hyperachiever, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
And hyperachiever doesn't mean I'm like a type A personality, because I'm not. Basically what a hyperachiever has is they have this issue of their value doesn't come from within. So I don't find my value inside of myself. I find my value in what I do for others and how that is viewed. And that is really hard. I was the PTO treasurer for 7 years at my daughter's elementary school. It's a 2-year term. One year I didn't even have a kid there.
Yeah.
Because I felt like my value came from being the treasurer of that PTO.
Yeah.
That was where my value came from. My value came from being the troop master of my daughter's scout troop. My value came from all of these things that I was doing. And once I understood in that book that no, my value doesn't come from what I do from others. It comes from the fact that I have that ability to do. It helped me dismiss a lot of those thoughts. And then the restless one is just this idea that I always have to be doing something.
Yeah.
I don't have to be doing something. I shouldn't value myself based on the fact that I'm always doing something. That's insane. I'm going to burn out.
Yeah.
And so I get down. There are days I don't want to do anything. And I've got these voices kicking me while I'm down. Once I can stop for a moment and be like, oh, that's not me. That's these saboteurs in my head. It helps me turn around quicker and get to where I need to be.
Yeah, you can't shut the voices off, but at least you can recognize and assess, okay, this is not normal. Let me pause for a second, take a breath, go change my scenery, whatever. And then, like you said, you can react quicker to those voices than maybe somebody else. So, no, I like that. All right, last question. If you hit your financial freedom number, meaning you could live an amazing life just off of the passive income that you are generating from your investments, what would you do?
See, this one's always so weird to me. So like, we don't really have a bucket list. Having a special needs child, it really affects everything. We have moments where we've got complete and total freedom. Like we went and spent 9 days with Jason's mom in Waco, and we were still able to hold our meetings and everything from there. She's got internet. She's not like out in the boonies or out in some country, right?
Yeah.
We were able to do everything we needed to do from there, but we had the freedom and ability to go for 9 days.
Yeah.
And that's one of those cool things. I feel like once we reach the point where we've got enough passive income to cover everything we want, I don't think we'll ever stop doing what we're doing, because I like being an educator. I like sharing information. My husband likes coaching underwriting. He likes crunching numbers. That is his thing. He loves spreadsheets that made me want to vomit. So I don't think we'll ever stop doing those things, but I think it would be just the ability to go.
Yeah.
Not necessarily internationally, because I don't know how Anson would do on planes, I just don't know. Maybe we get an RV and travel the US for 3, 4, 5 months. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We've covered a lot of ground over the last almost hour. So appreciate your time. If people want to reach out, learn more about what you've got going on, they want to learn more about the summit that's coming up in a few months, or depending on when this is launched, it could be tomorrow. But yeah, how can people reach you?
Absolutely. I'm easy to get a hold of. I'm on LinkedIn, Angel Williams. My husband is Jason Williams, PhD. If you see him post something and tag me, that's me. I'm on Facebook. I'm Angel Renee. I may already be topped out on friends. It kind of fluctuates. People drop me and I can add a few more people. We've got a Facebook group over there. It's the REI Rocks community, and we do a lot of interaction there as well. Or you can go to either one of our websites. We've got theacademypresents.com or lorrencapital.com, and it is LORREN capital.com. And that's based on our last middle names. My husband's middle name is a family name. It's Lori, Lory. My middle name is Renee. All our girls have my middle name. And so that's where the REN comes from. So Lorren.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for the time. It was really awesome chatting with you, and best of luck.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I hope you got value out of this episode of the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Your one-stop shop for education on how you can continue to work hard in your career and have different options to invest even harder. If you took anything away from this episode, please like and comment. I read every comment as it helps me serve you better. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss out on more valuable content. If you're watching this video, it means that you want to grow your passive real estate portfolio. The easiest way to do that is to join our investor club by heading to greatventurecapital.com/invest. The link is in the show notes. See you on the next episode.